Well, welcome to the Brave Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Connie Jacob, and today I have the Lindsay Harle-Kadatz with me. She is one of my favorite people because she's just so authentically her. And not only is she skilled in all things values and culture and business and figuring out what really matters and neuroplasticity and all these things. I mean, I don't know, Lindsay, there's quite a list that goes with you. But I think my favorite part of you is that you just remind everybody to just be who they are. And you're just very heart-centered and grounded. And you do spoken word, isn't that right?
Yeah. Yeah, starting to be a little more brave in using my voice in the poetry that I've created over the years. And so now it's up on stage and looking forward to doing more of that.
I love that. I love that. You know, back in my day, and I know people are going to be not surprised how cool I used to be, but I would go to rap battles and I would actually get on
Yes.
stage and I would actually try with my white girl self to battle these amazing rappers. And you know what? They tolerated me. It was great.
That's so that really is, I think, the definition of being brave is showing up in these spaces where you may not feel comfortable at first and just being like, okay, I'm going to try this. And I think when people see that we're trying and we're not disrespecting, because that's also key, is there's a sense of camaraderie, of cheering, of okay, well, maybe she's not going to become the next white female rapper. But she's trying and she's got some oomph and spirit and gumption. The world needs more gumption.
Isn't that the truth? And I think it comes down to what you and I were chatting with about on a walk
Mm.
back when it wasn't a polar vortex. And
Mhm.
we're chatting about values. And I think that when you are just being who you are and living true to what you really value, you
Mhm.
can show up in spaces differently. And I thought maybe we could have a conversation about that, about
Mhm.
emotional intelligence in values, because this is what you do so well. And so tell us a little bit about like values and emotions, like talk to me.
Mhm. Mhm. So val so I've had an interesting relationship with values, um, in that I also come from a marketing background, a very strong marketing background, where we know how to write great sounding values, wonderful sounding values. Um, Unfortunately, though, in marketing sometimes, and this is not always the case, but in a lot of companies, it's here's your values, now go, and those are them, and you just need to know what they are, period. And we don't take the time to actually understand, well, what are values in action? And so for me, when I started to do my own work in values, um, way back in 2011, and then subsequently since, it really became clear that values are not fluffy marketing statements. Values are not just these random things that we say, oh, this is what I value. They are our underlying beliefs upon which we take action. So when we can start to understand our values are our underlying beliefs in action, we get to look at them a little bit more differently than, well, it's a really good sounding statement. It sounds good to have. And this is why, oh my gosh, my brain is going everywhere. I'm like, and this is why integrity actually is not a value. And there's more to say to that. But um, when you and I were talking about the values, it really came down to what happens when you're in conversation with someone, whether that be in your personal life, your professional life, just the random street life that we often have, and somebody says something, or we're scrolling on social media and we read something, and we have this huge rush through our body of sensation, such as that anger or that heated ooh, or that just that cool sound of that's not right. Well, that's a moment to pause because that is an emotion that you're feeling, which is just energy ultimately that needs to be moved through your body. And when you can understand, oh, what was just said or what I just read has actually tapped into a deeper value of mine. And it's rubbing up against my definition of what this value is that is so important to me. And that's a moment to pause. And that moment is a beautiful moment, which allows us to reflect and note what was just said. What did I just read? Why is that bothering me? Why is that triggering this sudden sweat throughout my whole body, or my ears turning red, or my nose feeling hotter, or I'm telling you how I feel. Apparently, that's my anger rush. And it's that moment of, oh, this isn't about what was written. This isn't about what was said. This is about me and my values. And so before I react to this thing, before I go and get up on my high horse and type a statement up, well, you're wrong and blah, 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 as so many are prone to do online, it's that moment to say, why? And you can step out of the emotion at that moment and gain some clarity and start to respond in a more logical way. Period.
That was brilliant. Just last week on my Brave podcast, I talked about paying attention to what bothers you. There's a longing underneath. But I
Mhm.
like that you're bringing us to a place of even another question that can lead us to what do we truly value here? What matters to us?
Mhm.
And I think in our culture, we've really lost the whole art of values.
Mhm.
We don't teach values anymore. We talk about bottom lines. We talk about students. We want you to study for the test. We don't really talk about, like, my kids ask me every day, why do I go to school? Is there any point to this? I'm like, the point is perseverance. You're learning to persevere through things that aren't easy, and that's a value that you're going to want to have in your life.
Mhm.
You're going to need that skill.
Mhm.
Um, so I love that you're thinking around values and how you can actually discover them through emotion, because we've really lost this ability. And so can you break down for us a little bit about, like, how do you work with someone through this?
Well, but first and foremost, I do want to make very clear, I am not a psychologist. I am not a counselor. And I think that too many people are starting to give advice on this stuff from a more psychological counselor perspective, and we need to look to them as the experts for that. That said, that said, no, the unfortunate, so you talked about teaching values. Most people don't teach values. In fact, the majority of us don't actually take the time to pause and reflect on, well, what are my values? Unless we've gone through either a big T trauma or a little T trauma. And it was the same with me. And that doesn't mean that prior to that, we're operating with bad values at all. I was operating with the values that were my parents, and they are beautiful values, but they're not mine. And so there's a huge disconnect in how I was showing up, in the goals I was setting in my own life, because I was right on that corporate downtown Calgary high level marketing exec track. Clearly, that's not me anymore, because it never was. Um, so it really comes down to, don't wait until you have to have a trauma to be able to stop and pause and reflect on what is important to me. And this is so important for our kids today, for the young adults entering the workforce. And I think it's incredibly important that leaders in the current workforce understand that our values are what will help to motivate our people, and individually. So if we don't understand what our own values are as a leader, we can't actually help motivate our people to tap into their own values, to start to perform and to produce and to be engaged. So it's really taking that step back of understanding, okay, well, what are my values? What are my values? Because these are the ones that I keep saying. And the reason why I say integrity is not a value, that's a very strong statement. I understand that a lot of companies like, but it's one of our values. Well, let me say it this way. I would hope that any company who says that these are their values are in integrity with them. They're aligned with the values that they're purporting to have. So is integrity actually a value? Or is it just, these are my values, I'm now acting in alignment with them, and I'm showing up in integrity with them? And so there's that conversation as well. How do you find your values, though? Exactly that. Not exactly that. Exactly that to a couple sentences ago. You start by really asking in the quiet of the night or morning is my time, what's actually important to me? I mean, nobody, I'm not discussing this with anybody. I'm not having these conversations with anybody but me. What is important to me? If I didn't have to serve everybody else and be there for everybody else, what matters to me? How am I showing up in that? When do I feel in flow? That those moments of everything is just going according to plan, things are just happening, you lose track of time, you forget to eat, you forget to pee. Well, I never forget to pee, but some people apparently do. And then you take it one step further and think, okay, well, here's when I'm in flow, here's when I'm feeling really good, I'm feeling that juice and I'm feeling in the zone. What am I doing? What are those actions of mine that are expressing this value of mine? What's that expression? Which is that there are underlying beliefs upon which we take action. And so if we're saying, well, this is my value because it's been tossed on me, it's been modeled for me, and I haven't done my own work yet, that's okay. Pause and just think, well, how do I express it in this world? Am I in flow when I'm trying to act with that value? And that all goes back to, and actually you're the one who really introduced me to Johann Hari with his book, Lost Connections. It is one of the most brilliant books I've read. I love it. Love it. So, I'm pounding my desk. I love it so much. And it really was this awakening moment for me of junk values. That whole term that he started to talk about based on Tim Kasser's research and those values that require external validation. Well, that's not a value. That's not something that's going to intrinsically motivate you. That's not something that those are the values that will beat you up and tell you that you're a loser when you're not taking action, tell you that you're less than, tell you that you suck. Those are what those values are. So how do we move through that? And that's identifying our emotions, because your values don't make you feel like poop. Your values don't should all over you. There's a lot more.
Lindsay, come on. You're on fire. This is gold. And I think that you're bringing something to our world that, first of all, it's so timely,
Mhm.
and it's really needed. And in my world of working more in education,
Mhm.
I find that a lot of teachers are wanting these, like, just tell me how to motivate my students. And we hear it in workplace too. And I like that you're taking us deeper. It's not about finding tools and strategies to motivate even ourselves. We find ourselves unmotivated, feeling a
Mhm.
little meh with life. And I think that what you're saying here is dead on. If we can nail down how are we feeling, what are those emotions, and what is connected to what really matters to us, those values, I think you're right. Like the motivation becomes the byproduct.
Mhm. Well, and I will it is our values that help to intrinsically motivate us. That and this whole idea of self-determining theory, that's a different conversation in and of itself, but leaders need to know about it. So come talk to me about that, because if you don't know it, your people are never going to do much with you. Motivation. So what you're saying about motivation, yes, there's that intrinsic motivation. Kindness is one of my core values. And this definition has helped my personal definition of kindness. And I think that's important to understand too, is that we can have the exact same value with very different definitions based on how we express them. Neither is right nor wrong, but it's understanding what perspective what lens are we looking at said value through? And what lens is that person looking at it through, so that we can actually come together in a conversation. So for me, my personal definition of kindness is to do what's right, to do what's hard, and to do it with compassionate love. It was minus 40 freaking 5 last Friday morning. You know that. It was brutally cold.
It's so cold.
It was a running day for me. My behavior of running, though, for me, for my mental health, is kindness to myself. So I did what was right. I did what was freaking hard. It was hard. Nobody wants to go out running in minus 45 weather. But I know what the action is, and I know what value it's tied to. And I'm busy, not busy, and I'm very focused on being kind to others. And there was this moment in 2023 when somebody said, "You're not being kind to yourself." And it's like, oh, I need to start doing that for me. And so I layered up. I went for a shorter run, but I still went for a run. And I was motivated to do it because of what that specific action does for me in living in alignment with the rest of my life. So it's that kind of understanding of, well, what is that definition for me and how does it show up? Do I have that awareness of what that is? And how does this get me out the door? Because I don't have a treadmill.
Hmm. Wow. So friends who are listening, you're literally getting a coaching session here, talking about identifying emotion, what's the value under that, and then taking it and actually figuring out what does that mean for me? Like,
Mhm.
I love your definition of kindness. My definition of brave is showing up when it's hard. So it's
Mhm.
similar to
Mhm.
your definition of kindness. But I'll tell you what, I'm not gonna run in that weather, but the way I express bravery is different. And again, I think so many times we end up in relationships, workplaces, we lead teams that are misaligned because we've missed these steps. And now today you've given us these steps to come
Mhm.
back to. If you're a leader listening, try this with your team. Bring Lindsay in if you can do that. If you're a teacher, do this with your classroom. If you're a principal, do this with your teachers. Bring me in. I'll bring Lindsay. We'll have a party. We'll have tea and biscuits and do this together. Like I think what's beautiful is that you're giving us tools to imagine different environments that really we all dream of. And then we
Mhm.
all want, we just don't know how to get there. And I love that you have these keys to get us there.
Yeah. And one quick thing is how does this translate into a corporation? Because that's very much like, here's the stuff. So one of my clients, whom I adore, they're amazing. They are just this beautiful IT consulting company here in Calgary. And they're a small team of 13 now. And they brought me in to really clarify their messaging, their values, all of that. But the thing is, if we do that and then we just leave it, it's going to be a dead document, an unimportant exercise. So, and that was one of the concerns that one of their people said is, we've done this stuff before, but I want to make sure that how is it going to be prioritized into action? And so what we did was I came in and with the values is we wrote them up. And with all 13 folk, we said, here's the values, here's the definitions, but what do these mean to you? And so they did the exercise, and they were all able to really start to understand, well, what does that mean for me? And then we had a conversation around it so everybody could start to hear everybody's perspective. Then we took it one step further to, well, and how do you express this in your role? And so they started to understand and really see how this ties together. And I've gone back and done a couple other values exercises with them to just keep bringing that in. And every time, and this is a very technical team, they're very technical. And after that first exercise, there was one fellow who I knew he'd be the one, if there was any pushback, he'd be the one because he's very much the devil advocate. I absolutely adore this guy. I love him. But he comes to me and he says, Lindsay, I understand values now. You made them tangible for me. I'm like, great, yeah, fantastic. That's what I was supposed to do. But then he took it one step further. And I think this is the real power that we really need to look at. Why values? He said, now we know that when we come against challenges and we have to make a decision, we have the foundation that we can look at to decide which is the right decision for us based on the values we have. This was not their leading team. This was one of their senior technical engineers.
Wow.
That's the power that values can have in the company, and they've grown since, and they are so aligned. It is a beautiful thing to witness and be part of.
Oh, what meaningful work you get to do. I
Mhm.
love it. Well, friends, I hope that you have gotten so much value out of this talk on values. But Lindsay, thank you for just the gift of you to our world. Thank you for always showing up with kindness. That really is evident in your life. And I just want to thank you so much for being here. And everyone else, you just keep being brave.